stand and let's make welcome the Most Honorable Andrew Michael Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica.
I grew up in a place called La Vega, Spanish town rocking, over place, over.
Thank you. I did not grow up in a place called De La Vega. In fact, I was born at the Spanish Town Hospital, and then I spent my formative years growing up just down the road there on Cumberland Road. And then my mother was lucky enough to get an NHT house, and we moved to Ensom City. So this is where I started life. And I remember many days walking from Ensom City to St. Catherine High School, going to look for my great-grandmother, who was alive at the time. I was fortunate to have my great-grandmother, my grandmother, and my mother, so I couldn't go wrong. And I have family. My family home is just up the road here on Brunswick Avenue in front of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So I know this area very well. In fact, there was an old theater here called the Astor. It's a church. Yeah, can you imagine the transformation? So, my heart is full to finally see this piece of land develop. And I think that there's still many undeveloped pieces of land, and indeed lands that are in use, which could be developed as well. Spanish Town has great potential, exceptional potential. I don't want to go into all the challenges, Chris, which would have prevented us from realizing the true value of Spanish Town. Crime being the major obstacle. But I'm here to say that the government has developed a plan, which it is already executing, where it intends to take over all our urban spaces and redevelop them. The challenge is not crime. The challenge I want to put to you today for your consideration. The challenge, the real cause of our urban decay is that we have allowed the spaces to deteriorate. And the deterioration happened because we simply did not have the wherewithal to invest and to continue the reinvestment in the development of our spaces. I give you an example and an explanation. Most buildings have a useful life of maximum 50 years. They will last longer than that, Buildings will last even 100 years. But they may not be functional after 50 years. It means, therefore, that whatever you build, no matter how well you build it, you must maintain it. And as you look at the buildings in Spanish Town, they all lack maintenance. If you take the square in Spanish Town and you look at the old museum, the old archives, these were well-built structures coming from colonial times, well-built. But if you don't maintain them, they will fall apart. As you come into the town, you see the lovely Georgian buildings. They're all falling apart and disappearing simply because we have not maintained them. Now, I know that there are persons listening to this, and the immediate thing is, careless government not spending on maintaining infrastructure. That may be so. But what is the root cause of all of this? The root cause of all of this is that our economy was not growing. The root cause of all of this is that we simply did not have an economy that generated the revenues for government to maintain or the opportunities for businesses to invest. That's the root cause. So what is it that we need to fix first? We must fix our economy. Regardless of what our ambitions are, regardless of how we feel about the infrastructure and the frustration, unless we fix the economy, we will not have the resources to maintain our infrastructure. We fall in a trap, however, that having not paid attention to fixing the economy, governments are forced to borrow in order to be able to respond to the demands of a population. Borrowing is only pushing the problem of a weak economy down the road. Eventually, you're going to have to contend with that weak economy. Jamaica had its point of contention with a weak economy a decade ago, when we were all forced to accept the need for fiscal responsibility. The acceptance of fiscal responsibility by both government and opposition, whichever political party may form that, is a watershed period in Jamaica's development. The reason why we can now have a strategy in place for urban renewal rests squarely on the fact that our economy is doing fairly well. I'm not here today for an economic lesson. I'm here today to heap praises on Sagicor and its partners and to say what a wonderful development this is. But since I have this lovely audience here, it is very important for me to make some connections in the minds of our public. The first of our urban renewal programs, which is built on our economic platform, is a property pretty much like this, which, and it's a very good example. It was a former factory. It produced tires, not just for Jamaica, but for the region. It was a flagship factory in Jamaica, the Goodyear factory. And as economic conditions changed globally, but as economic conditions changed in Jamaica, the factory was closed, like many other factories of its kind. It sat on 25 acres of land. Governments before tried to resuscitate the factories, spent $125 million on refitting, and it didn't work. I will say one thing to you today. The laws of economics are as immutable as the laws of physics. Meaning that if you throw something up, the engineer in the room will tell you it must come down. But politicians like to make wild promises and say they're going to return a factory to production when there is no market. Who's going to pay for that? You, the taxpayers. But you, the voter, feel good because a factory is going to come back. But you, the taxpayer, you're going to feel the burden of $125 million spent on refurbishing, which didn't make sense. My job, though I'm a politician, is not to give you wild and unrealistic promises that may make you feel good as a voter, but affect you terribly as a taxpayer. My job is to ensure that you understand your role as a voter is inextricably linked to your role as a taxpayer. You must ensure you have a good economy. And it pains me to hear people who should know better sometimes speak of our economic improvements and the establishment of stability in the economy as something to be swept aside in the grand consideration as to where Jamaica is in its development. Nothing that you want, whether it is better roads, more garbage and more garbage collection, more water supply, whatever it is, better security, you can only achieve that when your economy is doing well. And until the Jamaican voter start to think in this way, they will continue to vote for policies that will make them feel good today, but they will have to pay for tomorrow. We must break that. We must break that. And if I am to be frank with you, my tenure as your Prime Minister has been wholly and solely dedicated to breaking that. This administration came under tremendous pressure politically to break our fiscal responsibility, to spend carelessly. And we did not. The fact that we did not means that we have now started to entrench fiscal responsibility, not just in laws, but also in the political economy of the people. It is in your interest to have a government that maintains fiscal responsibility. So, why is this development possible? Why is it that we are now able to develop 25 acres of land in St. Thomas, the old Goodyear factory, into a brand new urban center in a sustainable way, where Chris, Mr. Bailey, you have pointed out that you have persons who have already purchased or leased some of these properties. In Morant Bay, everything is gone, already bought out. It is because persons who have resources to invest realize that they can make good investment in Jamaica, that they don't have to convert their Jamaican money into US dollars to invest in a safer market overseas, that they can take a risk on Jamaica and invest in Jamaica. When your economy is doing well, people choose Jamaica. Think about it. Mr. Bailey, Danny Williams, yourself, Chris, you made a choice to invest in an area where I'm sure people looking on will say, why them wanna, them know what they do? You know, they might be very skeptical about investing in Spanish Town. But once the economy starts to turn, every business person knows that the time to invest is as the economy starts to pick up. And you can see many more investments like that coming into areas like Spanish Town. The question now is, how do we get this now to operate at scale. I'm happy for this one. I consider this almost like an anchor investment. I am certain that property owners along this stretch and in the environs are now going to take a second look at Spanish Town. In the same way that investors are now taking a second, third, fourth, fifth, nth look at St. Thomas as an area for investment. They see the roads there, they see the water, the internet, they see the development of the urban center, and they are putting their resources there. There are at least 3 or 4 housing developments, including a hotel development, which will take place in St. Thomas, an area which previously nobody paid any attention to, just like Spanish Town, an area where nobody was paying attention to, maybe except the native Spanish Town. I say, Mr. Robotham here, you have always been a Spanish Town investor. But now Spanish Town is becoming an area where investors are going to pay attention. The truth is that after 50 years of poor economic performance, after 50 years of infrastructure deteriorating, there is now an incredible opportunity for businesses to come and reinvest in the existing infrastructure. Mark my words, you're going to see developers, financing companies start to look at communities like Brunswick Avenue, Ensom City, Greendale, Hampton Green. All these are communities with fairly good infrastructure. Roads are in, some have sewer, some have water mains. What is needed is for an investor to come and buy all the properties and redevelop them. The only challenge that I see with this is that we are all building what is called aspirational housing. I'm trying to use my terms very carefully, but I hope I convey the meaning. It's aspirational. It's a middle-class pursuit relative to a middle income or upper middle income, even lower middle income pursuit for housing. But the real deficit in housing, and I'm saying this in the hearing of, I see an extensive audience of real estate bankers and developers here. The real need for housing is in what I am going to be terming achievable housing. Otherwise, affordable or low-income housing. That is where the real deficit for housing is. We have launched a housing development called Catherine Estate, not too far from here. We've put out sometimes 100, 200 units. At one of our advertised lots for sale, we had 26,000 applying for something like 500 units. That is the level of demand that exists in that segment of the market. And so, whilst I have this platform celebrating this development, which is very aspirational, which will transform this area, I wish to remind the business people. So yes, the NHT is in that area of the market, the housing agencies in that area of the market, but the NHT and the HAJ will not be able to build all the affordable and achievable housing that we're in need of. We need the private sector to go into that segment of the market. And I see the chairman nodding because he is on the threshold of that market. He's just between aspirational and achievable. And yes, we must get the prices down so that the bartenders, the hairdressers, the gardeners, the mechanics, those persons need houses too. We must get the prices down. Now, it's not just for me to just talk it down. I mean, there's so much I can do with moral suasion. But we have to get the interest rates aligned. We have to get the approvals and permitting process. Mr. Councillor representing the mayor. We have to get those things moving quickly. That's part of the productivity agenda. And we have to integrate technology because there are many new building methodologies now which can reduce costs. But possibly the best way for us to improve the affordability of housing is for government to make lands available for housing development. This is a private development. The investors bought the land, and so government could not in any way seek to say the houses here must be available at a price lower than what the market would be willing to pay. Absolutely not. Private investors, you have made your decision. But the government can, through certain policy activities, influence. And we have been influencing market prices through the availability of financing, through joint ventures, through the developers program, through the guaranteed purchase program with the NHT. And all of those have been working to moderate prices, not necessarily to reduce them, but to keep the prices in a range that people can afford. But for us to get to the next level of bringing the prices of housing down so that the average hard-working Jamaican who is contributing but can't get a benefit can get a benefit, we will have to dig deep in our land bank and make lands available where the price of the land is considered to the total value of the house, but subtracted from the total value of the house when the house is sold. So we have started to look at that. We are very much down the wicket, and at the appropriate time, we'll make an announcement as to how this program will be executed. But I just wanted to use this opportunity to make the points which I have belabored, and in summary and closing, I will restate them. Firstly, everything that we want to achieve, whether as a voter or a taxpayer, we must have a good economy. If you don't have a good economy, a political promise is a mere mirage. It just looks good, but it will not be achieved, or if you do get it, it is not sustainable. The elements of a good economy is that the government must manage the public's resources with frugality and accountability. But on the other hand, it must use the public's resources to promote productivity and efficiency. I think we have managed the frugality part through the fiscal responsibility. The next part of our Jamaican journey is to get our country productive and efficient. Of today, we are desperately trying to demonstrate to the people of Jamaica by increasing the compensation for public sector workers and consistently trying to move up the minimum wage, that we also believe that if you work, you must be rewarded. But the reward doesn't come magically. The reward comes from productivity and efficiency. And so I have to stress that point every single time that I speak, because as a nation, we tend to get distracted by things that are not material to our success. And as Prime Minister, my job is to bring back the conversations to what is important to your household and your pocket. And finally, housing is one of the entitlements of the Jamaican citizen. And the government has a duty through policy to use whatever resources that are placed in its control, either through the NHD or through legislation, to influence the housing market. We have been doing so, but we agree more needs to be done to fill that segment of the housing market for persons earning just above, well, earning minimum wage or just above or just below middle income, because that segment of the housing market is underserved. And the government will, in short order, announce other plans that will accelerate and scale up the provision of housing for our low-income earners, housing that is affordable and achievable. So with those few points, let me thank Minister Grange is saying I need to say something about Spanish Town. I was hoping to save that for my budget presentation. But what to be said about Spanish Town, Minister Grange, this is my town. I love Spanish Town. I have many memories here, and I would never be in office and not have something done substantial for Spanish Town. We have already started. You're seeing the new hospital. In a couple of weeks' time, you're going to see the groundbreaking for a new divisional headquarters for the police. We're going to be doing some other things for education. You mentioned that we were considering this site for a school. We have another site, granted it is in Portmore, but it will serve this population. And we have other projects coming to deal with water. We've just put in a major water project up here for content. I believe Sagicor is a part of that, or was a part of that. You are a part of that new. So there are many big game-changing projects happening in and around Spanish Town. But in terms of the announcement for the comprehensive plan, this wouldn't be the place to do it. But yes, Spanish Town, there is a comprehensive plan. A part of that plan is to have an intervention to save what's left of our precious history that can be so valuable to us. So ladies and gentlemen, you have been a good audience. Thank you for listening to my lecture.
I